Hi guys, sincere apologies about that. No disasters or emergencies, but just it's my son who's been travelling. He's been trying to get hold of me, and I had to take his call. It's just personal. It's family. It has to come first, I'm afraid. But managed to have a good chat with him, and yeah, so hopefully all okay. So we can continue. Apologies. I really apologise. I feel bad. That's just, feel like I'm messing you around, which certainly wasn't the intention. Hey Tony, hi Andrew, how you doing? Thank you everybody, appreciate that. Hey Bill Moose, long time no see, hope you're well. So as I said before, I'm going to try and make this a bit of a blend of London calling and making this pipe. I don't want you to be too bored with just watching me doing the pipe, but I know a lot of you really enjoy that as well. So I'm going to try and chat and carve at the same time, chat and turn. So I don't know if you can see, I'll try and zoom in. So there's a little bit of a sort of a flat spot here. So I'm going to have to trim down the stem a little bit. How you doing, Boca? I'm just going to take it back a fraction more. I don't want to take it back too far because I want to do that flared junction there. So I'm going to just turn a little bit more. Hey, Jimmy. The stem is a little bit looser than I would like, so I've got to watch it as I'm sanding it. Daniel, I keep the stem in because obviously I want the stem to meet the shank precisely. So I want there to be a very smooth transition from from stem to shank. Therefore, once it's in position and I want to get the final shape of the shank, I sand it together so that it's exactly the same. Then obviously sand it to a higher grit to get back the nice shine and polish on the stem. Still a little bit of a flat spot there, so I've got to keep going, and I've got to get this. I might still do that by hand later on the sander. Maybe I'll flare out. So I'll narrow down the shank and then flare out on the. Actually, I might just turn that a little bit. Well, Andrew, to get the best junction, this is the way to go. Even if you're making the stem yourself, you got to do it on the lathe. Even if you make the stem from scratch, that's really the way to go. If I want to add an adornment, what I do is I'll get the basic shape done. If I'm just doing a ring, which I'm gluing to the stem, I'll do that afterwards, and I'll grind that down, usually on my belt sander. Sometimes I'll do it on here, it depends. But most times I do it independently. Down the road, bull moose, I'm completely open. It's an evolving skill for me, and I don't rule anything out. Turning silver is a particular skill. You've got very. It is a very skilled it's a different, it's another type of turning skill, which once you have it, you have it. But if you don't know how to do it, then it's a difficult thing to do. But you've got some really well-established and well-known and famous silversmiths. Peterson are very well-known for their silver. Les Wood, very, very well-known, world-famous silversmith when it comes to pipes. And these guys were really, really highly skilled when it came to turning silver and adding really nice silver adornments. Still smoking the Erinmore in the Northern Briars Lovat. Mr. Eximba. In terms of, thank you, Bull Moose. I'm doing things, at the speed that suits me. I don't want to overdo things, overrun myself. And at the end of the day, the most important skills in pipe making is the basic pipe making skills. Everything else is added luxury, it's added refinement, and as you progress in the trade, obviously you want to increase. The difficulty with that is, or let's say the pitfall, is that the more skill you add to it, the more you end up charging for the pipes. You kind of cut out a certain percentage of customers. And although you don't always have to make a complicated pipe, but if I looked into a crystal ball and was sensible about it, if you're able to get, for argument's sake, let's say somebody like Jeff Graysick, if he's able to get $500, $600, $700 or $1,000 for a pipe, why would he make a pipe for $150? It just wouldn't make sense for him to do that. So if I go too fast down that road, and I'm not saying that I'll ever get to that sort of stage, but if I did, it would cut out quite a big customer base. And where I am at the moment, I'm not looking to go up to $500, $600, $700. That's not what I'm interested in at the moment. I don't have enough of the time to be able to really focus on that kind of thing. For me to be able to do that, I've got to put much more time into it, into training and learning to do all those kind of things. And I'm not doing this full time. I'm still doing this really very part time. So it has to make sense to me. So the progression that I'm going through, the journey that I'm going through in my pipe making is taking all of that into consideration. It's taking into consideration my particular point in life, where I'm at the moment, and my commitments that I've got in life besides for pipe making. So I've got to kind of juggle all of that up and get the right balance. And for me, the longer, in any event, the longer I focus on my pipe making skills, the better off I'm going to be in the long run anyway. So I'm very happy at the moment, continuing the way I am. And there's an evolution the whole time. You know, you see my shapes progressing. You see me going for different shapes, trying different things. So I'm happy with the way things are. Hey Mike, how you doing? And that progression, if it continues to go slowly, I'll be very happy. Yeah, 100%, Chad and Daniel. It's a balance. You know, if you become world famous like Jeff Graysock, then he's going to have a queue down the length of his arm to buy his pipes, even at $1,000. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. But until you get to that stage, you've got to be able to sell the pipes that you're making. If you can't sell the pipes that you're making for $150, then there's no point really going. You know, I remember reading about some, I think it was one of the recent Chicago pipe shows, where some people were complaining that there were some new carvers who came in straight at $500. They didn't start off at $100 or $150. And people just said that they don't know who they are. The pipes might look good, but they don't know what the briar is. They don't know what the internals and all of that, how they make their stems and how they drill it. I suppose they could open it and look at it, but still, they weren't prepared to take a punt on $500 on somebody who's literally just come to the table with no history. Absolutely, Boca. You can gobble them up right now. And for me, one thing which has been crucial all the way through is that I didn't want this, and I know I can't stop it, and I didn't want it to completely take over my involvement in the hobby of pipe smoking, the YTPC, and all of that. And although, as I said, to some extent it's unstoppable, because the more I get into pipe making, the more I'm about pipe making, but I still really very much want to be part of the other side of the fence, if you like. And that's why, to some extent, to a large extent, I share my whole journey, because a lot of people, they just wouldn't do it. They wouldn't show their mistakes. They wouldn't show the times when they make a pipe and they're almost sort of swearing in frustration at the errors that they've made. I see some sort of new pipe makers making pipes, and the photography that they use to show off their new pipes that they've made doesn't allow you to see the full pipes, because they don't want you to see the parts of the pipe which haven't quite worked out. And for me, that doesn't turn me on at all. Even if the pipe looks good, that to me is for me, I started off as a very, very passionate pipe smoker. That's how it all started for me, and it became a journey. It became a progression, and this making pipes with kit blocks a year and 3/4 ago was just an extension of the hobby. It was like a lot of people do. There's lots of people on Facebook and on the YTPC who make their own pipes just, as part of a hobby. Like they would do any other kind of woodwork or saving stamps or collecting pens. It's just part of their hobby, but they never got an ambition to make pipes and sell them. When I started doing it, I was the same. But it just naturally progressed. I was enjoying it more and more. I was picking up the skill. And then it just made sense. What am I going to do with 100 pipes? Obviously, I could smoke them, but why not sell them? And I've said to many people, it's the timing has been such a godsend for me, because it's what's really kept me going during COVID-19. Photography's been dead, and I would have struggled big time. Without the pipe sales, I would have struggled big time. So it's been a big blessing for me, I have to say. And I think there is going to be in the future some kind of appreciation of that in terms of a giveaway or something like that. I'm not sure whether it's going to be Pipe 200 or whether no particular number, but at some point there is going to be some kind of a little give back for sure. And in terms of do I make pipes based on personal smoking experience or what typically sells? I was just about to say that, Daniel. You really put me to the post. I'm all over the place when it comes to making pipes. A lot of the time it will depend on the block. If I'm picking up the block and I'll see a certain particular grain, and I'll kind of try and follow that a little bit. But I do always try to maximize the grain, obviously. But there are times, of course, when you'll make a pipe in a shape that that you've been making that sells well. But I haven't typically done that. I know that, for instance, the LCS roadies, as they're called, those have sold very, very well. Sold every single one of them that I made. So I could very easily have sort of sat back on my laurels and just continued making those and selling them. But I wanted to explore, and that's really what I'm doing. But for sure, I'll be making them. I'll carry on making them. But for now, I'm just sort of exploring. I've got to try and expand my skill set, expand the shapes that I try, and that's really what I'm about. I'm in still the early baby steps of pipe making. I recognise that. So if I don't explore, if I don't push my own boundaries, if I don't challenge myself, if I just carry on making Rhodesians or apples and do nothing else, they're not. For number one, they won't all sell. And number two, what am I doing? What's the point? How am I progressing? Kingfisher in a round 10. Well, we haven't seen any more of the Germain's Rich Dark Flake here in the round 10s so far, since they first got released. The roadie with the green stem. Which pipe number was that? Hey Luke, how you doing? Why not drill the bowl now and match the stem? Because to drill the bowl, I've got to move it. And once I move it, I'll never get the exact same spot. It's almost impossible. And what you end up having is a wavy... If I try to sand it again, after repositioning it, I'll mess up the pipe. Once you're on a particular axis, you can't mess with it until you're finished. You can't move it on the chuck until you're finished doing exactly what you want to do on this position. I've had to do it in the past sometimes, and it's just a disaster. So whatever I want to do here, and sometimes I end up making a mistake because I focus so much on this stage, getting this area correct, I forget to drill the draft hole. Recently on a pipe that I made, I had to drill the draft by hand afterwards, which was the first time I've done it, and it worked out perfect. I was lucky. But it's not a skill that I've got naturally at the moment. It's not something I've done very often. I've had to tweak it by hand and stuff like that, but doing one from scratch, I haven't done. It's because I went from this stage, at the moment, because it's a bent pipe, the axis of the shank is here, but the axis of the draft hole is a different axis, so I've got to shift it. And sometimes I focus so much on this stage, I forget that, and I go straight to the bowl. And then I take it off for sanding. Once it's off, sometimes I can put it back on because I haven't yet done that axis, but sometimes I forget and it's a problem. 142. All right. I'll have a look at that. I have a slug of tea, as my father would say. Hey North Country, how you doing? So if I want to get a fair bit of briar off and some of the acrylic, I can speed it up. But what happens is often, so that's why I've put the live center in to help support it and also to keep it in there, because what happens is that because of the speed of the turning, it just turns itself out and you lose the position. And obviously because you want the bit to be horizontal in the right spot, see it's already turned off a little bit. There we go. So you have to just keep that in tight so it holds it in position. And if you want to go high speed, you don't want this coming out, so it helps to have the live center on, and it just helps keep the whole thing more secure. But what happens is now, because I've taken off some of the briar, you've got more briar here in the bowl area than here, and obviously it's heavier than this bit. So what happens is it's overbalanced and the whole thing shakes. So you have to gauge how fast you want to go. But the faster you go, the more briar you can take off quicker, that's all. Some people do drill it first. I don't do that. They drill the bowl first. Yeah, you could do that. It's just the way I do it. I prefer to drill the draft hole, and then when I'm drilling the bowl, I can do it bit by bit and make sure that I meet it and not overshoot it. So when I line up the drill bit for the bowl, I always line it up a little bit early, so that I take it out early before I hit it, and I do it millimeter by millimeter, so that the drill will be very close to the bottom of the hole, which is to the bottom of the chamber, which is where it needs to be. Cumberland stem and a normal stem. Cumberland generally is when you've got a two-tone colour. So traditionally, now there's loads of different colours, but traditionally it was black and red. And I might be wrong, but I think it was a thing which was a name created by Dunhill, and it generally became known as this brindle. Mike always says it's called brindle stem, but essentially this is an ebonite stem which is black and red, and that was the traditional Cumberland stem. Because it was, I think, for a long time pretty much the only dual tone ebonite stem that was used for many years until more colours were introduced, it just got known as Cumberland stem. But Mike always corrects me and says that it's brindle stem. Cumberland is simply when you have two different colours in a stem, as far as I know. I'm no expert. I'm sure Mike will chip in here. And Mike. Mike. All right, so we're good. We got rid of the flat spot. We've got a slight little flare going on here, which I might enhance later on. But now I'm just going to smooth it out a little bit more. So my initial sanding paper that I used was a 40 grit. This is an 80 grit. And then I'm going to jump to 120. And then 220. So I don't know how much you can see of that now, but that transition now is beautifully smooth. We're already starting to see the acrylic smoothing out a little bit, and there's some grain which I can see there. This pipe may end up being rusticated. I'm not sure at this stage. It really depends on how the rest of the pipe goes. So I will smooth this to about 220. If I end up leaving it smooth, I'll take it up to a 400 and then eventually 600. But for now, 220 is enough for me to be going along with, and just about the right spot to get that flared junction. So now, before I forget, I'm going to do the draft hole. Okay, so we're going to recite it for the draft. I've got the drill bit marked up there. Just take you out a little bit. If you use a match or you use a soft flame butane lighter, you should get a fairly similar thing. Some people actually like the taste that the sulfur gives off the match. Most people don't, but some do. It really is personal preference. You try it, you suck it and see. A lot of people don't like the Zippo fuel, the petrol flavour that you get sometimes. I find that you light your Zippo and you just let it burn for a couple of seconds, and then you bring it so that it burns off the excess fuel. And that usually is fine. It's just a matter of getting used to it. I also didn't like it when I first started using a Zippo, but now my Zippo is my go-to. When you're out and about, there's nothing going to beat a Zippo. There's no question about that. When I'm indoors, when I'm at home, I tend to use either matches or my Peterson soft flame lighter, butane lighter. But when I'm out and about, when I go out in the morning, Zippo goes in my pocket. And I usually keep a Bic in the car for emergencies, for when I forget my Zippo or if the Zippo runs out of fuel. See, this adjusting that I'm doing now to make sure it's square, I'm doing it by eyesight. And once I set up my new sander, I've got a new disc sander, which I still haven't got around to doing yet, mainly because I haven't really worked out where I'm going to put it, because it's a big sander, it's a 10-inch sander. So once I've got that set up, hopefully I won't have to do this alignment with relying on my eyesight. I've got used to that, and generally speaking, my pipes are fine from that respect. But it's obviously good to get rid of the guesswork if you can. Yeah, so the only reason why I bought the disc sander, because it's not a sander that I can use to shape the pipe. It's a big sander which has got edges on it, so I can't actually work on the edge. At least I don't think so. Once I set it up, if I can sort of dismantle it a little bit and allow me access to the edge, maybe I can do some rough shaping on it. But I bought it solely for the purpose of squaring off the block. So what somebody, I think it was Josh Dragon Briars, he told me that basically when you get a fresh block, some of them are pretty square, I have to say, but most of the time they're not. And so basically when you put it down on the sander, so you sand the bottom edge, put it down, you get that as straight as you can, and then once you've got one straight edge, you can work off that. So you put that down square, that's square now, and then you can do that edge, and that's going to go square. Then you do the same there, and that's going to go square. As long as you get your first edge as square as you can, then you should be good to go. Depending on how bad it's been cut, you might end up having to square off quite a bit of briar. So. Right, let's see if we're okay on the drill bit, if I've got the angles right. That's okay. So oftentimes, because it's a bent pipe, sometimes you'll just nick the bottom of the mortise in order for it to get at an angle so that it drills in the center of the bottom of the mortise, and that's absolutely fine. When I first sort of started buying pipes, I used to get a bit upset when I saw a little nick, and I didn't understand why it was. But now that I do, and it has no bearing on the pipe at all, and it's just unavoidable, I'm absolutely fine with that. Thanks, Ocean Waves. How do I know if I'm drilling high? Well, sometimes, depending on how acute the bend of the pipe is, sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes you've got no choice, and sometimes you have to drill high. I mean, I've got some pipes which I've drilled higher than I like, but it's acceptable. And then, of course, you can re-drill it. Once you've made the pipe, you can open that up a little bit inside. You can create a little bit of a ramp leading into the draft hole, and you can just make it absolutely fine. But when you're dealing with acute angles, it's really very hard, and it's an appreciation which I have for a lot of pipe makers now which I didn't have before. And when I see a lot of bent pipes drilled very, very high, I understand why, but when they're unacceptably high, I realize that they haven't really taken much care. This is going to be a bent pipe, like maybe a quarter bent, something like that. So you can see that little wobble there. It's because it was touching the base. I'll show you. So I don't know if you can see that. There's just a little nick at the bottom there, and that's in order for me to be able to get a straight line into the middle of the mortise. I'd much rather have that nick and have the drill in a good position than not have the nick and have it far too high. And especially with 9mm, it's got to be on the base of the mortise. If it's not, then it's going to miss the filter. And I've had that before, and I've been very upset about it. You know, how to send pipes back and things like that. So that drawing in and out is just to smooth the draft out, to make sure that there's no rough bits inside. And then I'll also go with a circular file in there just to keep everything nice and smooth later on. Alright, I'll show you this later on once it comes off, but it's absolutely plumb center, the drill. I'm very, very happy with that. And as long as I don't mess up the bowl drill, we'll be good to go. Trying to understand, I've been drilling, hold on, let me light my pipe. I'm much cleverer when I've got my pipe in my mouth. Still smoking Erin Moore in the Ian Walker Lovat. Right, now, what did you want to know? Professor Simon, at your service. Do I have any videos where I smoke a pipe? Loads. Right, let me first deal with Andrew's question. Trying to understand, I've been drilling shank fully first and then turning the shank. You can only do that with a straight pipe, Andrew. If your shank is straight, if you're doing a billiard, for instance, or a Canadian, I'm not a Canadian because that's not round, but if you're doing a round shanked straight pipe, then you can drill. You don't have to move it. You're drilling and turning and everything all on one axis, on one plane. So it's not a problem. But when you've got to change the position, then first you've got to position for the mortise. How can I explain this? Okay, I'm holding a pipe right here. Okay, so this pipe here is a straight pipe. So when you're drilling and when you're turning, you're keeping it in this position. It's staying horizontal. Yep, so it's no problem. So you can drill, you can shape, you can turn, and then drill. You can drill first and then turn, no problem. But when you do a bent pipe, so here's my recent Peterson that I bought. It's a very, very slight bend, but it gives you a good example. Now, if you're turning, you've always got to be horizontal, right? So in order to turn this junction here, you've got to tilt it so that it's horizontal. So the bowl is going to be tilted up. Now if you drill your draft, you're going to come into the bottom of the bowl and come out the other end. So you've got to first position the mortise horizontally. This is not a good example actually. Okay, so here, remember this pipe? So if you want to turn this here, you can't turn at an angle, right? Because it's going to be all over the place. So you have to have it horizontal. When you're turning, you've always got to be on this horizontal plane. So it's got to be like that, so the bowl is tilted up. Now if you drilled the draft hole, then you're going to, in this pipe it wouldn't be a problem, but generally speaking your draft hole is going to go through the bottom of the bowl there. So once you've done this bit here, you've got to then drill it like that, so that you're, well, whichever position you'll line it up with, of course, but most times you'll have to reposition it to drill the draft hole. So you have to, while you're still on this horizontal axis, you've got to do all the shaping and turning that you're going to do of this junction first before you adjust it to drill the draft hole. I made a bit of a pig's ear of that, but I hope that made some sense. Right, somebody else asked the question. Luke. Yeah, I do plenty of videos smoking a pipe. Jimmy, can you mount your circular file into the drill chuck and file it that way? No, is the short answer, because it's not a completely circular. If it was a completely circular file, I guess you could do it, but I don't think anybody would do that. It's just not. A lot of the time, you know, it comes to a point, so it's really only level there. I suppose theoretically it can be done, but it just wouldn't be worth messing around. Yeah, definitely, Andrew. You do have to try it to get it. There's no substitute for trying. Trial and error. You guys remember my early days of trial and error. That pipe, in fact, that I just showed you was one of my trial and errors. Yes, it is a Stanwell. It's pipe of the year 2020, Eric. I basically wanted to try out one of the modern Stanwells not made in Denmark and compare it to the ones that are made in Denmark. Maybe I should do a video comparing them side by side. That might be an interesting video. Doing really bent pipes like a calabash pipe, essentially, I mean, I'm no expert. I know there are people who use curved bits, which I obviously don't do. But generally speaking, what you'll often find is if you have a pipe which is very, very bent and you don't see this little chip on the bottom, but often you'll see a little godet or a shank extension or something like that, which is glued on afterwards. So you won't actually see that. And sometimes you'll see some horrible monstrosities going on here, but it's all covered over with a little ring or a shank extension or something like that. And you might find that those pipes don't smoke well, and you won't know why. It's because there's some hidden stuff behind whatever thing they've put on to beautify the pipe. And that's not to beautify the pipe, it's to hide some sins. Sometimes, I'm not saying always, sometimes. Right, so we've drilled the draft, haven't we? We have. So the next stage is to drill the bowl. Now, there's a lot of briar here, and I end up sanding a lot. And I know Mike's mentioned this before, and I know it myself, is really I need to cut as much away as I can on the bandsaw. My bandsaw, I've come to a stage where I probably need to invest in a better bandsaw. But again, it's not something I'm going to rush into. I manage as I am, you know. Luke, the short answer to that is there's no fixed amount. It really depends on how you pack your bowl and of course the size of the bowl. You know, if you had a standard size, you know, if you start going into the group numbers and things like that, you can then really make an assessment and say on average how long does it smoke, does a bowl smoke on average. But you know, how much tobacco do you put in your bowl? Do you fill it to the top? You know, how much do you tamp it down? So in reality, I could have a full bowl of tobacco, but it's really only half a bowl because I pack it very lightly. So there's no real answer to that. And it also very much depends on how you smoke it. If you're a chugger, if you're a soft, easy, relaxed smoker, you know, you take a draw every half a minute or so. Some people are just boom, 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 boom. So there's no real straight answer, if I'm really honest with you, Luke. How do I know to shape the bowl rounded or tapered? Do you mean the drill in the bowl, the chamber, or do you mean the bowl itself, the outside shape of the bowl? There you can see the shape a little bit better. So I've sort of turned it just a little bit, very, very roughly, this flared out a bit, but it's going to be more flared on the top. The bottom bit is going to be a more sort of fluid line from there to there, but it's this bit here that's going to be more flared. Inside the bowl. Generally speaking, and I haven't done this very much myself, but I did do it recently. The pipe that I did just the other day the rusticated one with the acorn shape, which I did as a kind of a nod to the recent Michael Burke's pipe that I bought. That one I used a tapered drill bit, so I used one of these. This is an OU as opposed to a V. So you've got O, U, and V. Sorry, not O, U and V. This is a UV. So just to give you a little lesson on that, this is an inverted U. So that's a regular shaped U over there, okay? That's a U shape. And then if you've got a really, really heavily tapered bowl, it's more of a V shape. This one is in between. So this drill bit gives you a U shape. It's a much wider sort of taper here, so it's a U shape. And this is in between. So it's quite a bit tapered, but it doesn't come to a sharp point. It's still got a rounded bottom. Hence, it's called a UV. It's a bit of both. So I've used that. I don't like using it because for some reason it jumps around and makes a hell of a racket. I spent a fortune on it. And I keep saying this, I should send it back, but I haven't yet. And I need to learn to grind them a little bit myself as well. Right, so now we're doing so you can see here, Andrew, what I was telling you before. These are the two axes. I've obviously drawn this. You have to draw this beforehand. So you can see this is, and you can see what I mean about it getting right to the bottom of the bowl. This is the horizontal axes, which I was turning for the shank and stem. And this one is for the draft. And I always try to leave as much braille as I possibly can. And I will draw the line as high as it will allow me without, getting off the center of the mortise. So always try to keep as much braille below as I can. When you load the briar on the chuck in this axis to drill the bolt, you've always got to be careful where the tip of the shank is, because it's very easy to nick it. Sometimes if you're a little bit careless, when you put the tool rest in, you could knock it and you've got yourself, I just did it there, look at that stupid boy. And you end up getting a little ding and you have to sand it out, and it's just a hassle, which I'm going to have to do now. There you go. That little demonstration cost me some time, so I'm going to have to sand that out. So you just have to be careful when you line this up. So I use this as a guide, and I make sure that this is always a little bit higher than this. Hang on. So that way I'm generally never in danger of hitting it with my chisel. But in this case, I can't actually go any further because of the depth of the bowl. So I'm going to have to just be careful. You've got to try and make sure that your line is horizontal. As much as possible lines up with the center line. Otherwise you end up with a wobbly round shape at the top. So you've got to try and keep it lined up as best as you can. Raw Crafted has some really nice chucks, which have got two grub screws, which you screw into the briar. So, and you keep it on the axes. You keep one on at all times, and then when you're drilling the shank, you have it on the axes. But in order to turn it to drill the chamber, you just loosen one of the screws, and the briar block never leaves that central point. I can't explain it because I need to show it to you on. I've been thinking quite a bit of possibly getting one of those, but as I say, I do everything slowly. I'm managing perfectly well on this. Those ones are like $350, $400 to get those chucks. Maybe one day. Hey Maui, how you doing? Does the pipe smoke different if you use a U-shape or a V-shape? It's a preference thing, I think. I think that the pipes that I've got with extreme tapered shapes are some of my Boswell pipes, and they smoke very, very well. I think that it probably does concentrate flavour. I do think as well, as I say, I'm no expert, but I do feel that you also tend to get a lot of moisture focusing down in those V shapes. I generally prefer U shape myself, but there is a place for the V shape. I 100%. I'm not knocking it. Some people will definitely prefer it. So again, I will use this as my guide so that I never veer over. So I've got to make sure that I never get too near the head of that shank, the face of the shank. But at the same time, I want to be able to turn as much of that as possible so that I end up with an accurately turned shape, because the rest I have to do by hand. Oh, really? Did he say that? Well, I'm in good company then. A little bit too close. I do find that when I'm turning, you're leaning on the tool rest, it just sometimes turns just a little bit of a fraction and it hits that. So you just have to leave enough room for that. Just the pressure of it. You start to hear a knock and you don't understand where that knocking is coming from, and you realise you're going tick, 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 you're banging the edge of the briar. Okay, let's turn this bowl. No, I tell a lie. First we're going to drill it. If you drill the draft off center, personally, I've yet to have a pipe which is off center, which doesn't smoke okay. The gurgle, in my personal experience, again, I'd say this always in my own experience, I'm not an expert, but based on my own personal experiences with the many, many pipes that I've smoked over the years, although I generally have quite a tight rotation of somewhere between 15 and 20 pipes, I've had going past my hands probably upwards of 400 or 500 pipes. At the moment, I've probably got about 60 or 70, but I try pipes out. If they don't work for me, I pass them on. But I've had a lot of pipes go through my hands. I'm not talking about the pipes that I make, I'm talking about the pipes that I bought and sold. In my personal experience, gurgle happens the most when the junction of the draft hole and the chamber is not quite right. Being off center is not so much the problem, it's the positioning, it's the vertical position, not so much the horizontal position. So where, say this is the draft hole and this is the bowl. Now, you want it to be on the same line where it comes in. It's got to come in right at the bottom of the bowl. A little bit of a up and down is not the end of the world. But when you come in, sometimes you find that there's a little lip, and that lip, basically anything which can form a reservoir, which can allow moisture to gather, that's where your gurgle comes from. So if, for instance, you've got a bowl where the drill is quite a bit higher than the bottom of the bowl, so you've almost got like a little cup at the bottom for it because what happens is, when you're drawing in the smoke, that smoke, you want it all to go into the draft hole, into your mouth, and then out into the atmosphere. If you've got a big reservoir beneath the draft hole, some of that sort of condensation goes on, doesn't come into the draft hole, sits there, the condensation, then that smoke that vapor turns into water. And eventually, if you're drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing, as you get down the bowl, there's more and more moisture gathering, and you end up with a little pool of moisture. Then, when you're drawing air through the pipe, the air coming past that moisture agitates it, and that makes it bubble. It's not getting hot and boiling and bubbling, it's just the agitation of the airflow, which makes it just bubble a little bit, and that's what the gurgle is. So the main thing is to make sure that there's a smooth transition between the draft hole and the bottom of the smoke chamber. That's really the key thing. And I'll often spend quite a bit of time filing, drilling afterwards by hand, just to make sure that that is as smooth as possible, that transition. I'm Todd, I'm not an expert on that, but I know that that's a very common thing to do. People do that with briar pipes. You've got the Popeye pipes from Eltang. They have a metal or carbon shank. Speak to John Keller. He does that quite a lot with corn cobs. JWK. Search him on Instagram, John Keller. He's very good at that. He does that a lot. He does a lot of cob mods, and he does it well. Okay. All right, that's turned out really nice. The draft hole just slopes really nicely into the bottom of the bowl, and that's worked out really well. Happy with that. Usually I'm sort of going bit by bit, and but this time I marked it off and just went a fraction beyond the marking, and it's spot on. Right, so that's that. So now I'll, without pushing any further, I just put it in, let it turn, just to smooth the bowl a little bit, because I don't sand the bowl. 1820 flake. I have tried it. 1820 flake is very nice. The concept of 1820, generally, as I understand it, is to be a match for Penzance. So I don't know about Balkan flake. I don't know Balkan flake. I may have smoked it once, twice maybe, but I don't know it. So I can't comment on that comparison. But in terms of comparison to Penzance, I would say that after a year or two, it's probably very similar. I bought quite a lot of it. I've probably got maybe half a pound to a pound, probably half a pound. And I've watched it progress. I've dipped into it every sort of month or so. I've had it now for about a year since it came out. And right now, it's tasting the best that it's ever tasted. It's got a huge amount of plume on it, so very rich sort of oils coming to the surface there. But it's now just starting to really get the richness coming through, the fusion of the flavors. Beforehand, it was really quite bland, and the richness of the Orientals and the Latakia really wasn't fusing. It wasn't really melding into one nice, rich Balkan flavor. It is now. It's you know, but you have to bear in mind, if you buy it now, it depends how old that stock is. So you just got to be prepared to let it age a little bit. You know, there are some Balkan tobaccos, especially Balkans, because they've got rich components, that you can enjoy straight away. And the 1820 you can enjoy straight away, but if you're trying to compare it to Penzance and you're trying to get that really rich Balkan experience, I didn't get it until a year later. It was improving steadily, but now, a year later, it's really at the best that it's been yet. And I don't doubt that it'll still continue to improve. Once you get beyond a certain stage with Latakias, it starts to soften again, and it starts to just mellow out, and you can appreciate that beauty in itself as well. It's just another stage, but then you get a really nice, the richness still there, but it's sort of stepped back a little bit, and you end up getting a smoother, softer, sweet, sort of sweet and sour, musty kind of flavor and aroma, and it's really very nice, really very nice. But if you want something to give you a whack across the face, a Latakia punch in the face, smoke it more fresh, I think, and go for, you know, there are some other blends out there which have got much more acrid, if you like, Latakia flavors. That's not my preference, but you know. How do I determine what size of hole to drill the bowl? It's your choice. My average drill that I do on 90% of my pipes is 20 millimeters. Sometimes I'll go 22 if I'm doing a really big pipe. Sometimes I'll go 18 if it's a really narrow pipe. It depends also on the briar. You know, if you've got a really small, narrow block, you know, a lot of times, especially for beginners, you don't want to spend too much money, or you haven't got enough money to spend on the blocks, so you're buying the smaller blocks. What that means is you end up getting narrower blocks. With a narrower block, you've got to visualize that the circular shape is going to be even narrower than this. So, so sometimes, in order to have a bit of briar left in that thickness, you don't want to have the walls being too thin. So sometimes you have to go for a thinner drill. But generally speaking, my preference is 20 mil. Also, another thing, Andrew, if you're still watching, or anybody else, I've taught myself, although I'm right-handed, very, very much right-handed, I've taught myself to stand left-handed in order for the same reason, is to keep away from that shank. And now, I'm now to that extent, I'm more comfortable turning left-handed. But when I'm doing an angle like this one, because it's an apple shape, I'm going to be turning at an angle. I will do it with my right hand because I'm well away from that shank, because I'm doing it at an angle like that. Have I ever made a hand-carved pipe? Well, before I got this, the lathe, obviously everything was hand-carved. Some sanding on a disc, but the very, very first, I'm trying to remember if I ever done one completely by hand with files. I don't think so. I've used files. I don't use them that much, but I use them more on the stems, but on the bowl, no, I don't use files generally. I know that a lot of the high-end pipe makers do use files for the shaping, but it's how you're taught, I guess. I've never been taught. Everything that I've done is YouTube-based, advice from other pipe makers, and just sucking and seeing, just trying it out myself. So I'll start off with a really wide turn. It's obviously very crude. You've still got the flat spot there, which I have to get beyond. But just to see how it's looking, see that it's following the shape, the original shape that I've drawn on the pipe. And you just progressively take it down further and further until you end up with a circular shape. So you see there's that flat spot there. Alright, so we're almost on the circular shape. I've just taken the corners off so that I can get to the sanding, so I can get to the bowl. And now we're back to sanding. It's looking like it's got some nice grain. I need to sharpen my chisel, I can see that. So you can do quite a bit of shaping when you're doing sanding as well, especially with a heavy sandpaper. You just bring it round a bit just to get that nice rounded edge. And the beauty of sanding on the lathe means that whatever you're doing is perfectly circular. Just putting a very slight dome on it. It's a finish, it's a shape that I like on the rim. Very slight dome. And any of you that are making pipes, the more time you spend at the lower grits, the more you'll benefit from it later on. The lower, if you get dings like this, which has come from the chisel, I need to sharpen the chisel. So you've got these kind of little sort of dents in there. I can't get right into that now. I have to do that when I'm shaping. But the more you can do now, the better off and smoother the pipe's going to be later on. I'm going up to 80 grit. Also, when you're sanding on the lathe, you don't sand along that way in the direction that it's turning. You go up and down. Otherwise, you're not going to remove as much briar. So basically, you're going across the direction. That will give you a better sanding experience. Okay, 120 grit. The reason why I trimmed off the corners, because when you're sanding, if you don't, you end up knocking your fingers and you end up getting lots of sort of little wounds on your fingers, which I used to get all the time. I still get them occasionally, but nowhere near as much as I used to. But you just learn that as you go along. When I sand, I always do it two-handed, so that you're really sort of guarding against going too far, because your other hand is holding you in position. You still have to be very careful, because Okay, 220 grit. See, doing it this way, I've never gotten anywhere near the shank. I always use the second hand as a safety device. That's holding me back from taking it too far, from getting too near the chuck. Using a hand file, what, on the lathe? No, I would never do that. You can't hold it. So I can see the grain on this is quite a multi-grain. There's a bit of bird's eye on the rear side of the bowl. There's a bit of flame there. We shall see. The shank didn't look 100% clean. There's a few little spots here and there. So I'm not sure yet. Still unsure at this stage whether it's going to be smooth or not. But I still like to smooth it out as much as I can in case it's going to be smooth. So it's really got a nice shape now on the top. It's very equal, it's very nice, got a little curved dome rim, and that's a good place to start. So I'm going to move over to the desk now. I'm first off going to set up my tripod so you guys can see what I'm doing. With you in a tick. If I don't set this tripod up now, then I'm going to end up making you dizzy moving the thing around later. Okay. There's the drill, the bottom there. But shape, looking really nice. Happy with that so far. Very slight dome on the top. It's got some nice grain on there as well. So we shall see how we go. Alright, so this is the point where you might want to turn your volume down. All right, let's get the mask off. Whew. Oh, beard is itching. All right, so this is where we're up to. And it's looking really, really nice. Very happy with it. Bit of like a scoop kind of shape, bit of an author. Quite a bit more sanding to get the shape. But it's looking good. Happy with that. Hi Mel, thanks for joining. How are you keeping? And this this little sort of curve here really worked out a bit there, and goes narrow over there, fans out there, fans out there. And this little V shape on the black there works out pretty well as well, but that's just chance. Yeah, I guess it's an apple. So now we're going to do some hand sanding. On the disc, I go to 400, but then I go back to about 320 by hand, and then take it up to 400, undercoat, then 600. Sorry, on the brush, and then 600. All right. So what's the chat been while I've been sanding? There's my ashtray. Still got the Erin Moor in the Northern Briars. Hopefully it won't need too much hand sanding, because I managed to get most of it done on the sanding wheel. A scoople indeed. Actually reminds me a little bit of one of the L-Tang shapes of on one of the Stanwell models. A poop. Josh. Well, during this stage, I can chat and talk to you guys if any of you got any questions. Daniel, if you're still there, you've been hanging on. I don't know if I've got a major delay here, I'm not sure. Let me just reset it. Hey, Bowmans. Yeah, I think I did see Joe Case. He's been cranking them out recently. And I think he's doing them a lot faster than he used to. I'm not sure, but he might be using pressed stems. But he's got some classic shapes, classic finishes. He's got some really cool finishes. Oh, Robusto, right. So, Mel, how's it going? Are you working on a pipe at the moment? He's got some really nice rustications, especially the dual tone ones. I had his, he's got like this diamond cut rustication, which I bought one of his pipes. It was a custom made pipe I ordered from him. That pipe that I sent off for the sandblasting, I actually was in touch with the guy on Friday. He's busy at the moment, so it's taking a bit longer than usual, but hopefully I'll get it in the not too distant future. Actually, this one should sandblast very well. I think I'm going to send this one for sandblasting. It's got an awesome ring grain. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it, but there's a ring grain starting around there, and it's just going all the way up at in layers all the way up. You might just be able to make it out. Can you see that ring grain in there? You see that line going across, and then above it, and then the next one. I think this one must be. I think I'm going to have to sandblast this one. It'd be crazy not to. I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's got great grain as well. It's always a difficult question. I like sandblasted finish. I really do. But smooth generally are considered to be a better finish. Originally, sandblasting and rustication was when the briar wasn't great. But I think sandblasting in itself is such an attractive finish. So I don't need to sort of sand this to the nth degree if I'm sandblasting it. So we'll see. I don't know, what I might do is stain it, see what it looks like. If it looks great, I'll leave it. If not, it'll be a good undercoat for the sandblast. Maybe I'll be able to get a bit of a double tone sandblast going on. So we'll see. Yeah, I watched a bit of that one, Daniel. Um, you know, when it comes to converting pipes, Radices, they've actually got one on Alpesia's website. They've got a 9mm one, so I wouldn't bother converting one if I can get one 9mm. I just find them to be a bit pricey because they're the 40th anniversary, and that's fair enough. It's a special release, but they're a bit pricey. Alpesia's got them for like €350 or something like that. It's a lot of money. You're talking about almost $400. So I don't buy pipes specifically to convert them unless it's really easy. So for instance, a freehand pipe where it's got a big shank and you're pushing into the shank face and you're not lining up, you're not doing a smooth transition, then it's easy to convert, then yes. But it's only in exceptional circumstances that I'll buy a pipe to convert it even though it's got a smooth transition. And one of those will be, at some point, will be a Castello, because I've wanted to have a Castello for a long time now. And at some point, I'm sure I'll get one. I bought one, as you know, from GQ, but I had to send it back because the shank wasn't meaty enough. But at some point. But I don't think I'm going to spend 340, €350 on a pipe to convert it. There's always that risk factor in there. And I've got a couple of Radice pipes, so just to spend that money because it's a 40th, I'm not a collector in that way. I am a collector to some extent, but not in that way. So the fact that it's a special edition, the 40th, doesn't have that much meaning for me. Whereas it depends also, you've got some, you do have a form a connection with some people. So for instance, when Ian Walker brought out his 60th anniversary, I did spend the money on those, but even then I didn't keep them because I had a collector in America who was prepared to pay top dollar for them, and I sold them. So oh, you sold yours. I'm very happy, Mike. Very happy for you. As I say, Alpesia, I think the last time I looked still had. Maybe they've gone by now. Great pipe. I saw you put a video up, Andrew, about your 9mm again. What was that new one about? I haven't had a chance to look at that video yet. What time of day is it here? It's 10 to 3 in the morning. He challenged you to take the filter out mid-smoke. All right. For me, that would be a challenge. For you, it wouldn't be so much because you smoke many times without a filter. And how was it? Did you see any major difference? All right, this is where we are. We're going to go up to 400 grit. And then we will be ready for a blast on the mop. It was worse for you. What were you smoking at the time, Andrew? What tobacco? Oh right, I get you. Yeah. I've never had a lot of success with proper reverse calabashes, I must be honest. You know, even where you've got a much bigger chamber there. I don't know. I guess it could be because it's a small chamber. Maybe it's too much turbulence going on. I don't know. Maybe it's not enough space for it to cool down. Mike, I notice you don't have that many sandblasted pipes yourself. Do you have a preference for smooth? It's funny you should say that, Mike, because I also do, but I don't have that many. I'm kind of building them up slowly. That new Michael Burke's pipe is a sandblasted pipe. This new Stanwell is a sandblast, and so I do have some. And these ones, the rocks cut, are sandblasted, but they're kind of a indistinctive. And sometimes the pipes come up with a really nice distinctive sandblast. This one's not bad, but it's kind of a mix between a horizontal and the vertical, the way he does it. So it's not as distinctive in terms of a ring grain. I see what you mean, okay. It's interesting why they're rare, possibly because they're diminutive pipes often. But I did notice you smoking one the other day, a sandblasted one. I don't remember what brand it was. Oh right, was it the Northern Brides that was the sandblasted one? Right. One thing I'll say about his pipes, they smoke well from the off. I've probably had 15 of his pipes, maybe even more, over a few years, and they all, I think, every single one, possibly the first Helix that I had, not as much, but every other pipe that I've had from him has smoked well from the beginning. It's definitely been a standout feature of his pipes, presumably, you know, to do with the briar, the old briar that he's got. You know, he's got the James Upshaw briar. Yeah, his pipes, they really, really smoke well. Can't fault them when it comes to smoking. They smoke fantastic. Alright, I'm just going to give it a blast on the mop. I'll be back in a tick. I'm not going to move it, it's just not worth it. They are priced exceptionally well. They really are. Especially if you're ordering them from him and you've got the patience to wait. Definitely an absolute bargain in the piping world, no question about it. If you're buying them online, you're paying sometimes around $200, something like that. You buy it from him direct. You can buy the rocks cut. If you don't go for the Premier, you can buy them for $100-ish, roughly. So there we are with a quick buff. Nice flame grain emanating from that point there. A little bit less going on over here, but you often have that with a lot of blocks. And once you've put the undercoat in, it does absorb and it shows you the grain. There's some nice bird's eye over there. And there you can see the same grain emanating from there. Shapes worked out really, really nice. And that room will have a lovely bird's eye as well. So I'm going to go for the undercoat. And we'll see how we go. I'm going to pop you back on the table. So just bear with me. Where's my screwdriver gone? Okay, so now we're at the 600 grit stage, and once we've done the 600 we'll get the undercoat on, and that's probably where we'll have to leave it for tonight. Let's find some 600 grit. $400, $250. There's a bit of 600. Alright, so we're going to go with a 600. And again, even though I've already polished this out, I still sand over this so that the smoothness is maintained, the transition. Because when I buff it, because it's 600, it'll buff out very easily. That's the way to do it. Got a few sand spots on it. It's got a few dots there, you can see. So that's kind of leading me possibly to do the sandblast, but it depends on the staining if I can sort of absorb them well. You know, I'm not trying to hide them, but just to make the pipe aesthetically pleasing. I don't hide the blemishes. I always mention them. Always very try to be completely transparent and honest about the pipe. Yeah, that's right. So hopefully the staining will allow for that to still be an attractive pipe. I must say it did take me a while to get to the point where I'm okay sanding. I used to hate sanding. I used to absolutely hate hand sanding, and I did as much as I could on the sanding wheel, which resulted in more of a bumpy kind of finish because I didn't sand it enough. So the overall shape, when you look at it, it could look really attractive, but when you feel it in your hand, you can still feel a lot of bumps and stuff. But now that I do much more hand sanding. Number one, I've got used to, that being part of the process, and actually quite enjoy it sometimes. So the overall finish, the feel of the pipe is a lot better. Sand on, sand off. Right, before I put the stain on, I'm going to bend the stem. It's probably more of an apple shape actually. Even I should give it an extra grading when it's made live. I could certainly see why somebody would enjoy having that pipe and then being able to watch it being made. Quite a few people have mentioned that before. I think that is quite cool. What I do get a lot of enjoyment out of is that when I put the pipe cleaner in the first time and it goes right through, you can't see it, it goes right through to the bowl, there you can see it, and I haven't had to twist it or do anything. That's a very satisfying feeling. Unfortunately you don't get that in the smoke because of the filter being there, but if somebody wanted this to have the adapter fitted, it should go straight through because the drill is bang in the center. So that should be perfectly good smoke for somebody who wants it without a filter. I suppose I could put a letter L on it to indicate that it's live. It was made live. It's a nice idea. Or maybe LC for London Calling. Peepo. All right. No, never done a magnetic connection. That's quite a specialized thing. That I have seen them on Instagram and Facebook, but no, never done that. Okay, there it is. Just a soft, gentle bend. That's a lovely pipe, very nice shape. Very, very happy with it. So, to the staining. Good morning, 7 Early Mike. Thank you, Eric. I'm delighted with how it's worked out. The drill is good, shape is good. I must be honest, I am often a bit apprehensive doing the pipes live because I wouldn't say it's a pressure. I'm used to doing live videos. Obviously, I've done many, but I just somehow find that I don't have the same focus, and sometimes it ends up, with a little mistake creeping in here and there. So I'm relieved as well as happy with the way the shape's worked out. So once again, I'm using medium brown. That'll give me the best chance to absorb those little sand pits. And I could go for dark brown, but I find that the medium brown, the way the contrast works, when you do the contrast stain, it gives you a bit of a golden glow, if you like, to those bright spots, to the highlights. It gives you a nice I think Carl Newton Piper, he calls it like the sun setting behind the trees. So you get the dark bits of the grain and then the light bits behind it, and it looks like it's like a sun behind the trees. The grain is looking fantastic, I have to say. So I may well not end up sandblasting this. Yeah, I don't blame you, Eric. It's probably not the wisest thing in the world. I still do it because I enjoy it as being part of the hobby, and it's because I do my lives anyway on Saturday night, and like this, like I do with a lot of my workflow, I try to get as much in as I can in the time that I have. So if I can do my London calling and make a pipe at the same time, that's a result for me. And I think a lot of you guys enjoy watching that as well. So if you don't, say so, and it's something that I'll bear in mind. I'm not certainly don't want to bore the pants off anybody. Yeah, I think you're right there, Eric. I think the first real stab I did on the lathe, anyway, was live, and I think it was, well, I forget his channel name, something to do with soaps. Him, and it was also Drop Bear Woodworks in Australia. Two of them. They literally held my hand throughout the whole process of making my first pipe. It was actually a pretty awesome experience. And that really, I would look back at that always with fondness, because that's really was the basis of my pipe making. And it was really extremely generous of them to give me their time and to handhold me along the way. Some of you probably were on that video as well. Yeah. You know, I didn't realize at the time how, for me, how groundbreaking it was at the time. It really, really was the foundation of my knowledge when it comes to using the lathe. Just getting to grips with the whole concept of everything having to be lined up with that axes on the lathe. That's where I learnt it. Without that video, I think it would have taken me quite a bit longer to learn that. Doing it live, having somebody holding your hand, there's no substitute for it. It's like being an apprentice. It's like having a teacher standing next to you. And with the magic of YouTube live, made all the difference. Right, there we go. That's pretty good undercoat. There's about half a dozen coats on there. Maybe I'll do one more. No, I don't think it needs it. Alright, well, that's going on the peg for tomorrow, and no doubt at some point tomorrow you'll probably see the finished product. That pipe should be for sale, all being well, Jeff. We'll see what the end product is in terms of what the pricing will be. But my guess is that it'll be around £160, £170, something like that. Ah, ashtray. Oops, that's it. Nothing left? Oh, there is a bit left in there. Cheers, Eric. Have a good one. Tampa, where are you? Where is my Tampa? I have this problem. It's probably right in front of me. This is my workshop Tampa made by Pipe Tree. It's not patina, this is actually copper. This is a London Tower of London Bridge, Big Ben, Nelson's Column. That's the original colour actually. I actually did a video that day that I was out. I bought a few bits and pieces for a giveaway. Sort of London items. Can't remember who won that giveaway actually. But there were a few touristy kind of London items. Recovering know-it-all. How is it in Phoenix, Arizona? Another couple of sips of tea should be a bit there. Well, we had a record-breaking almost temperature on Friday. Very, very hot. I think some places topped over 100 degrees, which is very high for here in the UK. Wow, 118. I guess it's what you're used to. I think if we had that kind of temperatures here, we'd struggle. The vast majority of people here don't have AC. There isn't the need for it most of the time. You know, you have literally a handful of days a year where AC is needed. So people don't invest in it. I'm smoking my Northern Briars Lavat with some Erinmore flake. Do I know any Welsh pipers? There is one Dunholm piper on YouTube. I don't know if he's Welsh or not, but he's got some interesting piping he does. Oh, do you mean as in people who smoke pipes? Sorry. There is a guy in Wales called Dan something or other. He does a lot of bike riding. But I think he's more into cigars nowadays. He did smoke a pipe, but... Am I ever going to smoke the Northern Briars panel? I don't see why not. I have a bit of a queue of pipes that I need to break in. I've got, I think, at least 3 pipes, new pipes, which I haven't smoked yet. I've got a Skovgard pipe. I've got a Phil Rivara pipe, and I've got the Ian Walker panel pipe. Yes, Josh, you do. American of Welsh descent. All right. Hmm. I think I probably subconsciously put off smoking in new pipes because I don't often enjoy it. For some people, I think it's quite rare, but I have heard of people who the first smoke of a pipe is their best smoke of a pipe, and it's downhill from there. That's a very rare thing. It must be. Obviously, the more you break in a pipe, the better it's going to get. A good leather tray. The best person that I know, although I'm sure there's loads on social media, but the best one I know is Agape Custom Leather, AGAPE. Search him on Instagram. Like that. I've got a couple of his, but this is one of his when he first started. It's a bit mucky now. One of the prototypes has got a little hole in it now. These are seriously used. I've got one upstairs and one here, but they're much more advanced nowadays. He's got them now with sections with panels, one for the pipe and for your bits and bobs, and it's much more solid than this. And you pay more as well, obviously. I think I paid about $15 or $20 for one, and he ended up sending me two. But as I say, I think it was more of a at that point in time, I think it was more of a, he was just kind of learning the trade. But anybody that asks, I always recommend him. He's great. His stuff is really good quality. It's why I've tended to often break in a pipe with a really strong, rich tobacco. It's to mask that wood flavour. The newest pipe carver has joined us, Professor Walker. Yeah, 100%. This is made by Pipe Tree, and he's whittled that down himself. He hasn't got any machinery or anything like that, but I don't know how he's done the lettering there, but he must have some really serious large stamps. He's done BPR UK, which is what my channel used to be, which is short for Bosco Piper UK, and now of course it's London Calling with Simon. Well, Professor Walker, we've kind of come to the end of the pipe making, so if you want to watch it back, you can almost watch me make this pipe from scratch. It's now just drying off. I've just shaped the stem, and so tomorrow I'll be finishing it off. But if you want to watch it back, watch it back. I don't know how long it'll take to load up, but hopefully it'll be on tomorrow. And you should be able to see pretty much, I think it was almost from scratch. I may have already done the shank face, but I think we drilled the mortise, we drilled the draft hole, we shaped the shank, we then turned it and drilled the bowl, shaped the bowl, took it off and sanded it. The whole sanding process is on there. So yeah. Have you started using your lathe yet, Professor? I'm sorry, I forget your first name. I've been making pipes for a year and a half. Curtis, okay. So you started using your lathe. Okay, so watch the process where I sort of make this junction. That's really very crucial. And I've noticed all the new pipe makers have got that same challenge. And I know I went through that same process, and that same challenge is making sure that the junction between the stem and the shank is smooth. And just watch that. Spend some time watching that. I've watched you, and I've watched Mel, Andrew, and I think it's John T. Piper, who's also doing pipes now. I don't know if you guys remember him. He's posting more on Facebook. He hasn't done any videos of his pipe making, but he's also coming along leaps and bounds. And I'm watching all of you guys. You're not that far behind me in terms of time. You know, you started like a year and a half behind me, and that's really, you know, once you crack this, you know, the drilling and that, you guys seem to be doing well. But once you crack this this section here, you've got to be prepared to kind of take that. There is a bit of a plunge, a little bit of a leap of faith. Well, not so much faith, but you've got to be prepared to sand it on the lathe. And that's, you know, it takes a bit of getting used to. And I've seen, Curtis, that you've got a few little love bites from your lathe already. I'm thankfully learning to avoid those, but that takes time as well. But you have to be, obviously have to be very careful. And I hope you all wear face masks. You know, I would say in the first 6 months or so, I wore this the whole time. And I would very, very strongly recommend that you do the same for the first at least 3 to 4 months that you're making pipes, especially when you're on the sanding wheel. When you're on the sanding wheel, that pipe can take off quite easily, and I have that still all the time. Obviously, you teach yourself little tricks to make it safer, but I really strongly recommend that you wear a face mask, you know, for a good few months. Yeah, so if you've got the Darth Vader thing, then that's going to give you some protection, but just something to protect your eyes and your nose and your mouth is really very, very important. I've seen some videos of very early on, I think even possibly before I started making pipes, of a guy who'd injured himself very, very badly. So sometimes when you're on the lathe, for instance, and you're in there with your chisel and you hit something by mistake, maybe you'll hit the side of the chuck, so that's something solid. So if you imagine the thing spinning here and you're coming in here and you hit the metal, it's going to send it up like that, and it can send it straight into your face. A hard chisel, a sharp chisel, straight in your face at speed. That guy had got the chisel straight in his chest, and he was lucky to be alive. Really, really was lucky to be alive. He had a very serious injury at the time. So I can't. That's one of the reasons why I wear this. And when it was really hot the other day, I didn't wear it, and I kind of regretted it. It's another layer of protection. Leather is obviously strong. You know, it's not going to pierce that easily. It's one of the reasons why I had this made as well. So it's really important. Yeah, smashing your fingers is definitely. When I first started, I used to wear, you know, I wear this heavy leather builder's glove for bending the stem, because otherwise my fingers get burnt. So I usually wear 2 layers. I use one of these gloves, and then on top of it I wear this for when I'm bending the stem. But believe it or not, I used to wear these gloves when I was turning on the lathe. I was a complete novice. I didn't know anything, and I thought I'd protecting myself by wearing this. But the first thing the guy told me when I was doing that live video was take that glove off, because there's too much there, and it could actually get caught and pull your hand in. And I don't wear it since. I haven't. So that's important as well to know. the more sanding, if there's one lesson I can give you, is the more sanding. I'm no expert, obviously. I'm still new at the game myself. But the one thing if I would pass on, is that the more sanding you can do on the lathe, the better off you are. Even though I sand over it, most of it, you know, when I made this pipe, I sanded up on the wheel, the shank, and the top part here of the bowl, up to 220 grit on the lathe. But when I brought it onto the sanding wheel, I went all the way back to 60 grit, except for really the tippy top. I was back at 60 grit. But it just, the more you do, the more of a smooth foundation that you've got, the more of a smoother finish you'll end up with. And when you're sanding on the lathe, you're just guaranteed to have a perfectly round shaping because of the lathe's action. I can believe that, Curtis. You know, when I got this leather apron, I ordered it. I had it custom made. I'm a big guy, so I had them specially make it really large so it wraps around me, and not just at the front. And there was a couple of things which I wanted them to adjust, but I've become so sort of reliant on it that I've never had the opportunity to send it back. And you know, it looks like a car crash, you know, but it's a shame. You know, it's a nice leather piece, but it's functional. It does what I need it to do. And yes, I could still tweak it and make it fit a little bit better. It's very, very loose and hangy over here, but it's just there to do a job, so I don't bother about it. But a good thick leather apron is a good investment. It's worth, you know, paying some good money for it. I looked around online, and they just weren't good enough. They were always this little square apron, like a cook's apron, so it just covered literally just the front, which is fine. I had this one made. I think I paid maybe £140. That's a lot of money. It's a big piece of leather as well, a big, nice, thick, chunky piece of leather. £140. You're talking about like $170, $180, but worth every penny. And I also had them make cross straps at the back, as opposed to the normal apron has a U shape at the top and it's on your neck. And my one is the cross strap, and it doesn't touch my neck. It's shoulder straps instead of, you know, if it was on your neck all day long, it would bother you. All right, cheers, Curtis. Enjoy. Yeah, I had canvas to start with. I've still got it lying around somewhere, but it's not going to give you the same protection as leather. Wow, it's 20 to 4. I did have a couple of hours sleep this afternoon, which is why I'm okay. But I do have a photographic job actually tomorrow, so I can't go to bed too late. There's no buttons or anything on it. It's literally just hangs on the back. It's a shoulder strap. Give me a second. This is what I've got at the back. Beautiful brass buckles, and it just hangs on my shoulders like that. That's my shoulders. It's very, very well made. You can see it's got this thing there to keep it separate so that it's got the right shape, and it's got studs that holds it on the side, and it's got a belt to adjust the height of the straps, one on each side, and it's just beautifully made. I'm going to leave that off now because I'm going to wrap it up in a sec. The Simplex, how you doing? Good night, Boris. Alright, so this is the pipe where it's at the moment. And we'll get the stain off tomorrow. But shaping worked out really well. It's got a nice little curve there. It fans out a little bit. Gentle curve on the stem. And that should be a cracker when it's done, all being well. So I hopefully will be showing you that tomorrow. I'm going to wish you all a wonderful night. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Bullmoose. Thank you, Simplex. Thank you, Boris. Thank you, Matthew Perring. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, Josh. Excuse me. And thank you, everybody else, Recovering Know-It-All. 7 Mike. And everybody else. It's been a lovely evening. Thank you very much for spending your time with me. I hope it was enjoyable. I hope it wasn't too monotonous with all the pipe making. I'm always very self-conscious about that because you guys spend your time, you're kind of taking your time out to be on this London Calling. And usually they're more interactive, but I've tried to keep a balance of making the pipe and answering questions and trying to make it as enjoyable as possible. So I hope that worked out okay. I must remember to take these in with me. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. I wish you all well, and I will catch you on the next one.